Trapper is a killer all about placing bear traps and grabbing survivors who get caught in them, and that's pretty much it. Being the first killer in DBD, he is of course very simple and by extension kind of boring. His add-ons can help make him a little more interesting and a bit less miserable to play, and I have a lot to say about them. Too much, even. So let's get started. Our first brown add-on has the very simple effect of increasing the speed at which you set traps by 30%, which feels like a pretty hefty bonus for a brown. Setting a trap normally takes 2.5 seconds, with this cutting that down to 1.75 seconds. This is pretty helpful for being able to set up a little quicker, since the worst aspect of Trapper is the setup, so speeding that up is always nice. This also means that you can get that haste bonus faster, but that doesn't really help you very much. Another thing this can be useful for is the endgame collapse. If you lose a game, and the survivors are waiting at the gate for you to chase them out, you can instead set a trap over and over again to get extra blood points before the end. The gloves can of course allow you to get even more blood points than usual by speeding up this process. Pretty solid for a brown add-on. This is the Trapper's meme add-on, making your traps not injure survivors caught in them in exchange for doubling the blood points you get upon trapping someone. This means that when you trap someone, you get 2,000 points instead of the usual 1,000, but if a healthy survivor gets caught and escapes, they remain healthy. This sounds bad, and it definitely is, but it isn't as bad as it sounds, for one main reason. When a survivor steps in a bear trap, you can still grab them, as normal. But if a healthy survivor steps in a bear trap, you can still grab them, meaning the downside only matters if a survivor gets caught far away from you or someone else helps them. So that's kind of neat. The blood point bonus can be quite nice, but if you got a good map with lots of grass to hide your traps and people keep stepping in them, you can max out your deviousness points very quickly. Which is both good and bad, in the sense that you get a lot of points to spend after the match and all, but if you cap out early, any points you would have gotten from traps vanish into the ether, which is quite irritating. Can work well for farming, but you know what else gets you a lot of points? Actually injuring and killing everybody. These are worthless. Okay, that deserves some elaboration. The makeshift wraps make you unable to trap yourself, which can be pretty irritating. If you step in one of your own traps instead of hurting yourself, the trap just disarms itself, which does mean you have to reset it in order to make it work again, which costs you valuable time. This can be handy if you decide to lock down a specific area to the point that you can't enter it without trapping yourself, but you could also just pick up a trap instead, or just not do that in the first place. The strongest use case for this is definitely the basement trapper strategy, where you put someone in the basement and load the stairway and general area with as many traps as possible. You can't pick up traps while carrying someone, so if you loaded the stairway, then it is impossible to not step in one while someone is struggling on your shoulder. That being said, I would not recommend the basement trapper tactic, as it not only isn't very effective, but it also drags down the fun of the game for everybody involved. Overall, this add-on just isn't useful unless you have a habit of forgetting where you set your traps, but even then it's totally unnecessary since you can see the auras of your traps at all times, so you really have to not be paying attention at all to trap yourself on a regular basis. Don't bother with this thing. Our final brown add-on comes with a unique effect of making you set traps silently, allowing for a degree of stealth when setting up. To be honest, I don't have much to say about this one. It's perfectly adequate. It does allow you to more easily get away with setting up traps mid-chase, though you should only consider doing this if you have a speed-boosting add-on like the gloves, and you think you aren't being watched. It can also allow you to easily get away with setting up traps behind walls and other obstacles next to generators without giving yourself away, though your terror radius already kind of does that. It's an alright add-on, but I don't feel like it does as much as the other options. It's still better than the makeshift wraps, though. Our first yellow add-on provides the middling benefit of increasing the amount of time it takes for a survivor to disarm one of your traps by 33%. In more practical terms, the default disarm duration is 3.5 seconds, and this takes it up to 4.65 seconds. A little over 1 second of slowdown isn't much to write home about, and unlike, say, the contaminations of Nemesis and Wesker, this is by no means a guaranteed slowdown, since survivors can just not disarm the traps they find, which is the strategy some survivors may choose since disarming can lead you right to them. Increasing the time might discourage disarms to some extent, and that is definitely a good thing, but honestly this isn't a great add-on. This is an interesting one, since patch 7.3.0 sort of made this a base capability, and the add-on just strengthens the effect. When you set a trap, you get a 7.5% haste boost for 5 seconds, and this add-on strengthens that to 12.5%, which is a bit more noticeable and can help a little with moving around and setting up. I would say that the add-ons that increase trap setting speed serve that purpose better. Even having said all of that, zooming around is pretty fun, and if combined with perks like batteries included and play with your food, you might be able to engineer some sort of speedy trapper build. But by itself, I would say it doesn't provide much value. This is an add-on which upgrades your traps to apply the Deep Wound effect when someone gets caught in one. Deep Wound being a status that causes the survivor to enter the dying state if they go too long without sprinting or being mended by either themselves or a teammate. The only thing this really accomplishes is slowing down survivors sometimes, since if you are chasing someone, the Deep Wound doesn't come into play at all, and if someone escapes a trap outside a chase before you can get to them, then they have to take the time to mend themselves, which can provide a decent bit of slowdown, I guess. Not really all that helpful compared to something like faster setting speed. You basically have to get lucky to get value out of this. Similar to the lengthened jaws, serrated jaws upgrades your traps to inflict a status effect, this time the hemorrhage status. Hemorrhage, for those who don't know, makes your healing progress go down if healing is interrupted, forcing you, or more likely someone else, to have to start the heal from the beginning if the heal is stopped for any reason. This is marginally more useful than Deep Wound, I'd say, but that depends on if you can actually interrupt the heal. So if somebody gets caught really far away from you and manages to escape before you arrive, they might try and heal themselves. If you can interrupt the heal, then you get value from hemorrhage. If not, then it might as well not be there. At least with Deep Wound, the slowdown is guaranteed because they have to mend no matter what, but hemorrhage only comes into play sometimes. This add-on increases the time it takes for a survivor to escape a bear trap by 33%, with the same debuff applied to one survivor rescuing another survivor from a trap. To break this down a bit, it takes a trapped survivor 1.8 seconds to complete an escape attempt, with someone rescuing them only taking 1.5 seconds. If you attach this brick to your traps, then escape attempts take 2.4 seconds and rescues are 2 seconds. This can actually be decently helpful for buying a bit of extra time to grab someone who was a good distance away from you, and can potentially allow you to catch unfortunate victims who otherwise would have escaped. Of course, this add-on suffers from two main pitfalls, in that if survivors are rescuing each other, this is kind of meaningless, and if a survivor steps in a trap while you were chasing them, the extra time to escape is also irrelevant, and unless a survivor steps in a trap on the other side of a pallet they stunned you with, in which case they will usually have enough time to complete at least one escape attempt before you get to them, and the brick could help prevent that. Not that this is a common occurrence, but I thought it was worth mentioning. All in all, a pretty solid yellow add-on. Our first green add-on is a bit of a doozy, basically taking a brown and a yellow and upgrading one of them while combining them together. The fastening tools will not only increase rescue and escape times by 25%, a slightly weaker bonus than the wax brick, it will also allow you to set bear traps a whopping 50% faster. This is of course a stronger version of the trapper gloves, which I would consider the best of the brown add-ons, so this is quite a nice tool to have. This knocks the setting time down to 1.25 seconds, which is ludicrously fast. The lessened waxiness of the traps means this add-on provides an escape time of 2.25 seconds and a rescue time of 1.875 seconds, which is a nice cherry on top of the sundae that is the setting time bonus. Very good green add-on, almost feels more worthy of a purple rating, but I'm not the one in charge of that. Unfortunately, our next green isn't nearly as good. The Rusted Jaws falls into the same category as the serrated and lengthened ones, making the traps debuff the survivors, this time the flavor of choice being the Mangled effect. This cuts healing speed by 25%, so it takes longer to undo the damage, but after 70 seconds, the Mangled status goes away and healing can be done at normal speed, which kinda neuters the usefulness a bit. I would have said this was better than Deep Wound for slowdown, but now that the effect wears off, you might actually get more out of the lengthened jaws in that regard. That being said, if the survivors would rather wait out the timer than heal with the penalty, this can be quite handy for ensuring the survivor stays injured long enough for you to find them, and only need to hit them once instead of twice, which can definitely be quite handy. I wouldn't say this add-on is great, but I do think you will probably get more use out of Mangled than you would Hemorrhage or Deep Wound. This add-on increases the disarm time of your traps by 50%, as opposed to the 4-coil spring kit's 33%, which makes your new disarm time 5.25 seconds. This works pretty well for discouraging disarms, but most survivors will probably just power through the added time since the traps are a huge danger to them. Otherwise, my thoughts on the spring kit apply here too. It's just a better version of an add-on that doesn't provide a ton of help to begin with. Our fourth green add-on comes with the unusual effect of darkening the bear traps. What this means is that instead of their usual somewhat beige color, the trap will be almost pitch black in shade. What this is meant to accomplish is making your traps blend into the ground more, making them harder to spot, but this doesn't always work. In fact, I would consider the bottle to be probably the most inconsistent add-on the Trapper has. Not because it's bugged or anything, but because its effectiveness is determined entirely by the map you're playing on. If you get a map like Macmillan Estate or Autohaven Wreckers, you're pretty much golden, since those maps are fairly dark and the ground is pretty blackish already, so your traps will fit right in for the most part. If you get an indoor map like Larry's or Midwich, then it's a little up in the air whether this will really work or not, but at the very least the survivors will probably have at least a bit more difficulty spotting them. But if you get Coldwind Farm, then you are probably going to have a harder time than usual, and be cursing your bad luck pretty hard, since the lighting on Coldwind is so bright that the tar actually works against you and makes your traps stick out harder than a bloodstain on a white shirt. I wouldn't really recommend using this, at least not without a map offering to go with it, so that you can have some control over whether you get a good map or not. Our final green item is a bag. It lets you carry one additional trap for a total of 3, which makes for a nice upgrade, especially since you start with an extra trap filling that newfound space. Moving to the purples, this is where we get the really interesting stuff, starting with the Homing Stone, which makes it so that if a trapped survivor frees themselves from a trap without assistance, they will be left in the dying state. This is an interesting effect, but it can be a little difficult to capitalize on it without the Deerstalker perk to allow you to see dying survivors' auras. What makes this add-on valuable is that it puts a lone survivor in a bit of a catch-22, since the obvious counter to this is to wait for help, but this is an extremely risky move since survivors can't see the aura of other trapped survivors, whereas you can see exactly where they are. Meanwhile, if they do free and down themselves, they might be able to crawl away quickly enough that you might have a hard time finding them, but if you are already on the way, the odds of them getting helped up are slim, unless the survivor has some really brave and altruistic teammates. The situation for a trapped survivor is made worse if you are actually packing Deerstalker, though. So if people stepping into your traps while you are somewhere else trying to find people is a common occurrence, this is definitely worth considering. Just keep in mind the catch-22 is completely nullified if survivors are sticking close together, so it's not perfect, but it can be pretty damn valuable. Our purple coil is a bit of an odd one, providing the benefit of showing you the aura of a survivor that disarmed one of your traps upon you resetting the affected trap, so that you can get revenge, I guess. This doesn't really do much to help you with finding the saboteur unless you stop to reset your trap first, which gives the offender more time to get distance. And while the aura reading can help you get an idea of where they are and where they're going, it doesn't mean much if they are too far away for you to catch up in the first place. Not really worth it, in my opinion. Purple number 3 is the Tension Spring, which makes a trap reset itself 2 seconds after a survivor escapes it. This is pretty neat, since it means that if a survivor escapes from a trap before you can get to them, you won't have to reset the trap yourself. And as a result, it is entirely possible to see someone step in it again not soon after the first person because they assumed it was safe. This isn't super likely to actually happen, but it can be nice when it does. Our final purple is a very unique one indeed, as it comes with a powerful bonus but also a crippling downside. The thing being added onto your ability is that you start the game already carrying every single trap on the map. This means 8 traps, plus the 2 you normally start with, totaling 10. This is incredible, since it means you don't have to go out of your way to pick up extra traps, which is a huge time saver. Time saved is blood gained, after all, and this add-on would be a perfect example were it not for that crippling downside I mentioned. You see, apparently some jackass decided to modify Evan's traps while he wasn't looking, and now when they are placed, they are bolted to the ground. What I mean by this is, once placed, you can't pick a trap back up. This really sucks, and as a result of this downside, you need to put a lot more thought into your trap placement, since if you make a mistake, you can't undo it. I would honestly say this add-on could be considered a sort of trapper hard mode, more so than the padded jaws, since those things don't actually make a huge difference with their nerf. If you are confident in your ability to pick good trap spots, this can be a great boon, or a nice way to handicap yourself if you are looking for a challenge. This is simultaneously the best and worst purple add-on, and you will definitely struggle to make it work if you are inexperienced. Good stuff. I wish more add-ons could be this interesting. Moving into the final two add-ons, the Great Red ones, we first have the Bloody Coil. This is an add-on that definitely exists. It's not very good, but it's not bad either. What it does is it makes survivors take damage when they disarm your traps. More specifically, healthy survivors become injured survivors, and injured survivors become injured survivors. Yeah, survivors who are already injured aren't affected by this at all. This makes sense considering the Bloody Coil would be extremely overpowered if it could also down injured survivors, but it also results in the add-on not being super great at what it's meant to do, which is heavily discourage disarming traps. Sure, survivors will probably avoid disarming when possible, but anybody who knows how this add-on works knows how to counter it, which is by just only disarming when you're injured. You might get 1 or 2 injuries catching people off guard with this, but after that, people will either just not disarm or disarm when injured, which almost defeats the point of even having this. There are definitely worse red add-ons that can be found on other killers, but this isn't an add-on that I would say is worth using. Our second red add-on is also our final add-on for the Trapper, the Iridescent Honing Stone. This is the big one, the top dog of Trapper add-ons, the best one available for him, which is pretty interesting considering how simple the effect is. If you sharpen your traps with this magic stone, every 30 seconds one of your traps will just reset itself automatically. This is incredible, because as I said at the beginning of the video, setting up your traps is the worst part of playing Trapper. Granted, this does mean traps that were spawned in a random spot and haven't been placed properly yet will randomly set themselves in spots that might be a little inconvenient, especially if you're like me and have a habit of not touching set traps regardless of their position. But this isn't quite as bad as you might think, since the random spawn traps can catch some people off guard. That being said, of course, the best benefit this offers is the ability to not have to manually reset your traps when they go off or get disarmed. This is the best add-on for saving time and allowing yourself to spend that extra time chasing people. Top tier stuff right here. And that's all of the Trapper's add-ons discussed. All in all, a pretty good lineup. Certainly a lot better than what some of the later killers possess. I like them, for the most part, but what I want to know is what you think. Are my assessments of any of these add-ons incorrect? Maybe the makeshift wraps aren't the worst option and a complete waste of an add-on slot? Feel free to discuss in the comments, but in the meantime, I have more work to do. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.